from the Avalon in Hollywood, your longtime whereabouts, Hollywood, California. They had the kickoff presser for Ryan Garcia, Mario Barrios. Let me put respect on Barrios' name. He's the champion. On Mario Barrios and Ryan Garcia's first presser. We've dived into this fight pretty deeply enough heading in already. But some takeaways from the presser is, for lack of a better way of putting it, Barrios thinks Garcia has some bitch in him, and that I think that's him, not me. Anybody who steps through the ring is, a man's man. And everybody deserves respect. So I'm not saying that about Ryan Garcia, but I think Barrios thinks that, and I do think you saw, and the audience saw what I did predict heading into the dynamic of this fight. He does not like Ryan Garcia. I don't know if he fully respects. I'm sure he respects him as a fighter, but I don't know if he respects him as a man. He called him El Payaso, the clown. And I called this fight and got some pushback on it on social media. Understandably, I understand their points of contention. I said, look, if Barrios views himself as the Aztec, then Ryan Garcia, I think to him on some primordial level, is the conquistador. Okay. And people in the comments immediately said, how could you be as insensitive to talk about the conquistadors who raped and pillaged and colonized the Aztecs and everything? Look, I'm not saying Ryan Garcia is literally a raping colonizer or anything like that. What I'm saying is that, and everybody said, look, they're both mestizos, right? Yes, they are both mestizos. They are both Mexican American men. But Mario Barrios doesn't call himself the mestizo. He doesn't call himself the Mexican. He calls himself the Aztec. And in trying to have this kind of fun contrast that is not new to Mexican and Mexican American boxing, I'm saying, okay, the guy from San Antonio who loves the beef and stays in his roots and all that, against the Hollywood socialite who, I don't vote. I don't do the Bloodlikins and Democrips thing. But by the way, Ryan Garcia trumps his man. He shadowboxed for him, did all that, and ICE is deporting motherfuckers. So is that not more conquistador-like? Anyways, that aside, you could vote for who you want to vote for.
You're
But
clipping that out. That's going on the socials.
okay, right. But hey, it's America. Vote for who you want to vote for. I don't do it. But this contrast I'm saying is not new. You had Morales and Barrera. Morales from Tijuana, a poor, considered a lower class and everything in Tijuana. Marco Antonio Barrera, a Chilango. I know this because my wife, her family are Chilango. They're in Chilanga on her mother's side. They're from Mexico City. Barrera came from more of a middle class, upper class upbringing compared to Eric Morales. There was tension there, especially on Morales's part. De La Hoya Vargas, Oscar was viewed as the pretty boy, Americanized Mexican. Fernando Vargas is more the street guy, the tough guy. He, like Mario Barrios, used to come out to Aztec, Mayan kind of themes. And then Chavez de la Hoya, the real Mexican from Mexico, the OG warrior against the pretty boy, up-and-comer, Americanized Mexican and Oscar de la Hoya. So this fun contrast I'm trying to have is nothing new. I've gone too far into this too early in the show. I'm sorry. Bring it back in. Go ahead.
I will admit that before seeing these two in this presser and just kind of imagining what the promotion would look like, I was down that road that you're on. However, I did not feel any of that at the actual presser. I felt something far more basic, far more universal. I don't know any Spanish, so I'm not sure what a chilanga is, but I do know what a champion is. And Mario Barrios is the champion, and even you in this initial monologue put Ryan Garcia's name first. And not only is Barrios the champion, but when people say he's a champion, they have to give the qualification that he's the worst champion in the division. Well, you don't have to say that, but they do almost to a man. Every time you mention him having a belt, you have to mention that he's the worst belt holder in the division. And he's fighting a guy who got suspended for a year for PEDs, lost his last fight, and is still the bigger star on the card, who is still been able to position himself as the number one contender, and who is still the one off whose back this show is being sold. So that, I believe, what we're seeing is not cultural, it is universal disdain. The champion is suffering having to watch a bigger star with zero credentials, certainly as far as he's concerned, coming off the back of a loss and a suspension, talking mad shit, and not being able to say anything really with his mouth because he isn't an orator, he isn't a big time character. All he can do is talk with his fists on the night. And so what you're watching, I think, is a guy with some deep-seated resentment that grows with every word that Ryan Garcia speaks, and maybe, hopefully, motivated to fight better than he's ever fought in his entire life so that he can no longer be considered the worst champion in the division, shock the world, and put his name on the map and feel like a champion for once. I mean, he's also coming off the back of losing to a 40-year-old something guy who lost his last fight, who people thought was past it, and now really think maybe Pacquiao got robbed by not being champion himself right now. Barrios has a lot to prove, and I think that he is swallowing a lot of disrespect in the buildup to this fight, and that's what we're looking at. Ryan, for his sake, he knows how to sell a fight, but I also think that he's decided to loosen those screws back to closer to what we saw with the unhinged build-up to Devin Haney. That was working for him, best performance of his life, whether or not you can attribute that to what was in his system or what was in his mind. I think he's attributing it to what was in his mind. And he is shaking off a lot of the religious talk. He's shaking off a lot of the decorum and the reserved Ryan and going back to being a nut job and being mad awkward. That t-shirt thing was cringe. Ryan's not like really funny or, charming or anything. He's just unhinged. And it's as much cringe to watch as it is entertaining in any way. The guy has that weird energy where you can understand why people like the look of him, why he should be able to ascend to De La Hoya status stardom if he can deliver in the ring the way he's able to deliver on social media. But the gap between what he's accomplished and what he fits the part for is widening. So what we're seeing here is either empty antics that will prove themselves to be vacuous on the night, or a guy who's figured out the formula on how to win. That's the story for me. I want to get your take on the exchange between him and Goosen and the principle at play there. Because the two fighters, I think the dynamic I just described is really, really what is the story of this fight.
Well, yeah, I'll get right to Goosen in one moment. He certainly is summoning up. We said this already, all the chaos heading into the Haney fight, and body looks better than ever. Make of that what you will, heading into it. And yeah, but look, he seems to be physically and everything looking, the same system in physically and mentally heading into the Haney fight. Make of that what you will. But Barrios is a snack athlete, and make of that what you will. Okay, what do you know? It's elite level sports and boxing. Who the fuck really knows? But that speculation aside, that can't be proven one way or the other for either party heading in. I think in addition to, I want to talk about a few things you said, and then I'll get to Goosen. I think in addition to all the things you said about Barrios being disrespected as a champion, and I just think there's a natural, organic contempt on his side between somebody like a Ryan Garcia. And throw in everything else you mentioned on that. And so I'm very convinced this is going to be an excellent fight in terms of action. This is going to be a hell of a fight, I think. It really is. I think you're going to get both guys getting hurt. It's going to be a Mexican war. Because the dynamic change again. He had too much respect for Pacquiao. Part of him was in awe of Pacquiao. The little boy who grew up watching Pacquiao was in the ring as much as the grown man who's 31 years old against him. Not the case with Ryan Garcia, so that's something you're going to see. And by the way, he's not the worst welterweight champion. Louis Crocker is. Louis Crocker's the worst welterweight champion. And it's conceivable that
That's fired.
okay, just to out, to give Mario some credit here. And I don't know if Rolly Romero beats Mario Barrios. I know Rolly Romero is a more gifted athlete, a twitchier fighter with more God-given punching power. But I don't know if all around he beats Mario Barrios or if he's better than Mario Barrios. So you could pick Barrios against Rolly, and I wouldn't blink at that either. So he may actually be the second best champion behind Devin Haney, but it's not a particularly deep division. And I do think the charge that Barrios deserves is he's a very average champion, which is that really that bad of a distance? It's like saying you're an average NFL quarterback. It's like, well, you got to be pretty good in the first. Yeah, you are an NFL quarterback. You are a world champion. But he's one of these champions who has claimed his title from the Crawford dispense, like from him just vacating after beating Errol Spence 2.5 years ago. And what Raymond Murataya just did last night was actually stamp himself as a champion because he grabbed the interim IBF title at lightweight that Lomachenko gave up when he retired. And in beating a legit guy like Andy Cruz, now he's a champion. And Mario Barrios won his interim title against Fabian Maidana. He had a draw with Ramos. He had a draw with Pacquiao. This is the fight he needs to really feel like and be recognized as a champion, not just a guy who's a title holder with a belt, because that's what he does deserve the charge of right now. But the worst champion is Louis Crocker. Anyways, to the Joe Goosen angle, Ryan has a right to feel upset because when I was doing my lives heading into that fight, Tank versus Ryan, I showed a picture. Dirty old me, Peepin' Thomas, saw in the MGM media room the night before the fight, after the weigh-in, my man Leonard Ellerby, okay, who has gotten a lot of deserved criticism, but on a personal level, got love for Leonard. Leonard, parts of the PBC promotion, and Joe Goosen, all talking right there. I think maybe even Lupe Valencia, who Tank said before the fight, hey, that's the guy always on the phone with Al, right? Yeah, that's the guy always on the phone with Al. But Ryan fell into his own trap. He wanted that money. He didn't want to go through the process of developing himself into having even grounds as a world champion. Still hasn't won a world title. He went for the quick money. He sucked himself down to 136 and got knocked out. That's on him. And to Barrios' point, he took a knee. And that's why I started off by saying Barrios thinks he's weak sauce. That's why he said that at the presser. I may have never wowed people, but I'll never quit. And even Ryan agrees with that. You are a warrior. Anyways, though, when I took a picture, when they didn't know it, and I shared it on my live, and I say, look whose trainer is in a circle of PBC people, right? And Joe Goosen, the TGB and Tom Goosen Brown Promotions, or what? That's not literally the acronym it is, but it's a Goosen Brown thing. The G is for Goosen. So he's literally related, family, blood with the promoter of Gervonta Davis heading into that fight. And the night before that fight, he's in the media room yucking it up with the Gervonta Davis PBC team. And so Ryan is absolutely right to speculate that he was like a double agent of sorts. Joe literally commentated 4 PBC shows. So, yeah, he's right. Like for him to feel like he was set up a little bit, but he was an accomplice. He was a willing participant. If he was set up, which is a strong thing to say, he was an accomplice to it. So, but is he right to be mad at Joe? Yes. Yeah. Is he right to have his feelings hurt? Yes, he is. But what? All is fair in love and war, and this fight will be a war.
Well, espionage or double agenting,
right,
is a unforgivable sin from a trainer for sure. So if that is in fact true, then it doesn't matter what I'm about to say, because what I'm saying is based more on this kind of dynamic of training a guy, you part ways, and then the next move is to train his opponent. And whether or not that in and of itself, without some prior betrayal, is in and of itself a betrayal. I don't think trainers, especially who have been fired, owe a fighter anything because fighters systematically, historically, traditionally do not feel that they owe trainers anything once that big money comes and they decide that they want to move on or they've lost. Sometimes the fighter has lost because of his own performance, for his lack of training discipline, for his not listening to what's being said in the corner, or for any myriad of other reasons that is not the trainer's fault. And yet the trainer is the one that's got to take the blame, got to take the L, got to take the pink slip so that the fighter can mentally move on, blame the old trainer and get a new trainer and pretend like that solves everything. I'll say it again. A trainer has the worst deal in all of boxing, with the exception of the journalists. There is nothing you can say to a guy who's still trying to earn his money after you've dismissed him about breaking your heart, unless you're talking about what Sean's mentioned. And in fact, you were a mole in the camp. Well, that's entirely different. All I'm saying is that we really need to look at this trainer relationship to the boxer, to really the promoter, the network. Like everybody also, if you don't know, in the back rooms of boxing is breathing down the trainer's throat. They're getting calls from the promoter. They're getting calls from the family of the fighter. The fighter is ultimately deciding whether they eat or not eat, whether they live or die off one fight to the next. And they've got to somehow be able to control how the fighter trains, his mentality, get the fighter's trust, make the fighter work off his game plan, find time to train other fighters in case this guy's out the door after the next fight, and so that he can make enough off of all of this collection of fighters at the same time so he can make his own nut. And all of this just goes by the wayside at the whim of any boxer who decides that it's time for this trainer to go. Now, Goosen standing at that podium, I got to admit, the way he responded to Ryan made me a little suspect. I was like, I feel like you might have did something. I don't know. I don't have the picture. I wasn't there. I have no idea what you did or didn't do. But I will say, with all that I just said, Goosen might feel like he's I feel like you're guilty of something. Like you did something.
The picture doesn't prove anything, but they also say a picture is worth 1,000 words.
Yeah. And well, of course, you're going to also train your new fighter who's now fighting your old fighter on the mistakes that your old fighter would make, on his vulnerabilities. When you fire a trainer, you're putting that guy back out there. And I also don't think it's a betrayal for that trainer to expose your weaknesses with his new fighter once he's been dismissed. Like, you think an NFL coach that goes to another team and then plays their old team in the Super Bowl isn't going to use every bit of information he knows about that player and their system to win the game? Like, if you want the kind of loyalty that one would have with a comrade in arms, if you want to act like boxing is frontline warfare and the guy next to you in the trenches is forever your brother, then as a fighter, that's how you got to treat trainers. Until that happens, then everybody's a mercenary. And Joe has just put on a new uniform because he's been assigned a new kill. And this time, the kill is Ryan Garcia.
Yeah, to your NFL point, absolutely. Yeah, ask the Raiders when they went against John Gruden and the Buccaneers in the Super Bowl. They were like, they knew every single play we were running, literally. So, yeah.
What's he going to hold back?
Right.
For some loyalty to the club that he once worked? No. And I would say probably, I don't know. But I would think in the NFL, because it's a team environment, you run the organization, whatever, maybe there are some organizational secrets that should be privilege. Some things you shouldn't be able to take from one organization to another. But in boxing, no, man. That has traditionally been every man for himself, and nobody exemplifies that more than the fighters.
Yeah, they to close. Yeah, you're right because to a T, typically the rule, and of course there's always exceptions to a rule, is that fighters are not loyal, and that's the word on the street in this business in this sport from publicists to managers, promoters, trainers, journalists, etc. All that stuff. Fighters are not loyal. They're gonna look out for themselves first and foremost, which isn't exactly a unique human thing. And there are exceptions to that too. There are fighters who keep one trainer their whole career. Canelo did with Eddie in the face of everyone early in Canelo's championship run going, I don't know if this is the guy. You might want to call a Robert. You might want to call a this guy or that guy. And they did. So there's exceptions to that. But traditionally, the rule is more that fighters are not loyal. Now, as for the fight itself, I don't know, man. I'm on my Radio Raheem shit. I'm having fun not actually picking the fight and just breaking the shit down in the best I can in each direction. And I know. At least let me. It's like a shooter. When you miss a few shots, you gotta let the offense come to you a little bit. You gotta throw it down in the paint to Raheem, to Shaq in the paint, and let him work a little bit. And yeah,
I'll tell
make a
you what,
shot or two, and you feel better. But
I'll let you work through the playoffs, but once it's finals week, you're gonna have to give us a prediction. There can only be one Radio Raheem. That's more than enough. Believe me, nobody wants two of them. So
yeah.
we're gonna need that Sean Zittel's stamp come fight week on who's taking this thing. And it isn't one thing that you have to remember, and I know that you brood over this. It isn't a knock on you if it doesn't come true.
But they
It's
used to always do that. And last year it was harder than ever. So that's bummed me out.
but
And if I
how you
can't,
arrive at your pick is the fascinating thing because it is informed by so much research, so much knowledge, so much history, and then a breakdown of the fighter's abilities right up until the last fight that we need to hear it. These are informed, not just predictions, but this is a scientific hypothesis. That's what we are in the game for. That's what we want to hear. And then if the fighter doesn't live up to the mathematics, well, you know what? At the post-fight press conference, I'm
on
gonna start
them.
asking, why were you not the fighter that Sean mathematically designed you to be? What the fuck is wrong with you? That the prediction isn't wrong, the fighter's wrong.
Well, I'm at least going to hold off nowadays, literally until after the weigh-in, because I didn't pick Mortaya Cruz, right? Last night, I genuinely thought it was a 50-50 fight. But I'll tell you what, when I got to fight week at the press conference and I got to the weigh-in, and it helps that much more to actually be there, which unfortunately I'm not there as often as I'd like to be these days in the changing landscape. When I could see from Murataya was my gut pick once fight night got here. And it was because I saw in the same demeanor as him that I saw from Crawford heading in to Canelo in retrospect, able to gather my thoughts after I incorrectly picked that. And that part of that, again, it wasn't a scientific thing. I think I was in my feels about the Saudi shit and all this other shit. But it was that Murataya had that same look that that Crawford had on fight week. Canelo was enjoying his public. He was egging on me and Dana at a press conference. Crawford's focus never broke. And then the weigh-in got there, and one guy looked in better condition than the other guy who was still in tremendous shape. And Canelo Alvarez, same thing here. Murataya looked in even better shape, even more impeccable shape than Andy Cruz. And then slowly things start to come to you right before the real fight is about to happen. You start to go, wait a minute, this guy's got Robert Garcia, who was a champion in the pros and has the biggest stable in the game. I like Bozienis. I love Bozienis, but he was not a world champion in the pros like Robert, and he is not nearly as decorated as Robert. And wait a minute, Matchroom gets their fighters beat all the time, and Matchroom doesn't know how to build up a pro the way Top Rank knows how to build up a pro. And wait a minute, as I continue to watch this, there is no hand speed or athleticism advantage for Cruz. And wait a minute, Cruz basically wins his fights with a 1-2 and a twitchy high guard. Murataya has a deeper back. So, all right, fine. I'll pick the fight for this one, but I need to wait until I see these guys on fight week, and I need to wait until after the weigh-in, which only makes it juicier, right? You got to tune in at the last moment to know who the big SZ is picking. But as of right now, I don't have a pick. I said I think the bookmakers have it right. Garcia makes sense as a slight favorite because he is the more talented fighter. But let me tell you something. Barrios looks very locked in, looks up for this. And Barrios, this is the first time Ryan's fighting a bigger man. Barrios, you talked to me about that. You were there. This is the first time he's fighting someone taller than him. Ryan's a tall kid at 35 and 40. At 47, he's fighting a taller guy. And Barrios, when they asked him about how do you neutralize the left hook, says, my distance and my timing. That he has dimensions in his size, pause, as the kids say, they got me, to that he hasn't gone up against. You know, Haney has long arms, but Barrios is a 6 foot tall welterweight. And Garcia, Barrios once upon a time was as skinny as a 122 pounder, but he is a full-fledged, full-grown welterweight. And Garcia just got to this division by so I don't know, man. I'm convinced it's going to be a good-ass fight, and I'm not convinced who's going to win it yet. As of now, I rescind my Ryan Garcia pick and may resume it Friday night, February 20th, the night before the fight. We'll see.